Welcome to the Battle Ready podcast, where we know that every single day is a battle. This show is about equipping you mentally, physically, and spiritually to win the daily battles. I want you to become totally free, whole, and powerful. It's time to step into your battles equipped and ready to win. I'm your host, Dr. Kaylee Judge. Let's get battle ready. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Battle Ready podcast. This is Dr. Kaylee, and we are on to type 5. I'm excited for this. We had type 4 last week, and Angie spilled her guts on who she is and what we're all about. I feel like we're best friends, and I've known you forever because I know pretty much every detail about who you are, so that's pretty cool. But this week we're going to shift into the type 5s, which is also known as the investigator, the super brainy people that want to know all the details and all the things, and they shut themselves off and all that fun stuff. So I'm excited to learn about these like middle type 4, type 5. Like I don't know very much about them, maybe even like 6 and 7s either. So I'm excited to I've been learning a lot about these types, you types of people out there, which is exciting. So I'm going to start off with a question that I got from one of my patients, which I thought was interesting, which I think you may or may not be able to answer. But anyway, so I have these 2 patients and they're twins. Mm-hmm. One is a 5 and I think one is a 2. And their question is do you see that often with twins being different numbers, or is it more like twins are the same numbers, or is there a specific go around with that? What do you have to say about that?
I'm pretty open when I'm not an expert in an area. So I have twin nephews. I would say they are not the same personality at all. They've never taken the assessment, so I can't really say what personality they are. I don't love just typing people. But I would definitely say that they're not the same personality. And then I work with one twin. I don't work with the other twin, but they are definitely different personalities. So, I can't really say off the cuff or distinctively that twins are or they aren't. I know the 2 sets of twins that I know very well, which that's the 2 that I just alluded to, are not identical twins. So does that have something to do with it? I don't know. I do feel in my heart of hearts that personality is so unique regardless of DNA. Personality is a lot DNA, but it's also how we've learned to cope in life too. It's our strategy by which we have kind of adopted to cope with life. So I think there's a lot of nature and nurture, if you will, that goes into personality. I don't think it's one or the other. So I don't know. I can't say that. I can't say, I don't think that there is a right or wrong answer in that. I think that there is.
No, I just thought it was cool when they said it, and like I was wondering if there was like maybe there is like studies on twins and Enneagram types, or if there isn't, if somebody wants to do that, go for it and let us know.
I have just enough of my 5 wing that would make me do that research. So don't worry. I'll probably get back to you on that. And I'm very big on, if I don't know the answer to something, and this is anytime I'm mentoring somebody, or, even biblical narrative or theology, it's one of those things where I don't mind at all saying, hey,
I think that's good.
But
sometimes we don't know things. Doesn't mean that,
But I think it spurs us on to challenge the narrative of who knows, like we can surely look into that and see. But that would be definitely an interesting thing to look into.
Sweet. So let's dive into number 5.
Yeah.
Tell me about the basics of who is a 5.
Who is a 5? What we like to say at their best, 5s are very analytical. They're very persevering. They're sensitive. They're very wise, very objective. I like to even throw in the word discerning. And reason being is I think everybody needs a 5 in their life, because while so many different personalities make decisions based on emotion or how they feel, 5s are very good at separating the emotion and looking at things in a very logical, and not even black and white, but just very logical. They're very cerebral. They're very in their head a lot. They're very calculated. So numbers make sense to them. They're just very, they analyze things and they analyze things very well. At their worst, or in some of the harder parts of their personality, they can be a little intellectually arrogant because they find so much of their security in their intellect. It can come across as being very arrogant sometimes. They can be very stingy. And we'll talk about that a little bit deeper when we go into their core fear. And we'll touch on that. They can be very stubborn, very distant, critical of others, unassertive. They can be very cynical. 5s are your people that, have you ever heard of the analogy when it comes to like words, that women have, like 5 times more words for a day than men? Well, think of 5s as when they have had their fill of social interaction, they're done. It's a little bit like that. And it's not so much with words, although it can be. It's if when they get their fill of social interaction, they're done. And so they will retreat. So 5s are, like I said, everybody needs a 5 in their world, for just, especially if you're part of that heart triad, which are your 2s, 3s, and 4s that make a lot of decisions based on emotion. 5s are really, really great people to have in your back pocket to go to.
You were just explaining that like moment of being in a social setting and like just being done and you're done. And I was like, oh, that's totally me. I'm like, I could be a 5. And then I went and looked on the little wheel, and my little 8 goes to a 5 when I'm stressed out and when I'm in that place of, and I'm like, oh, okay, I totally get it. So cool.
So that's how you move. It's how you move and shape when it comes to your stress levels. Maybe there's a party coming up, and 5s are those that are going to get there 30 minutes late and leave an hour early. Like, they're not your 7s now your 7s are going to get there to plan, prepare, and set up. And then they're going to be the last to throw all the garbage away, and they're going to be the last to leave. But 5s are the opposite of that.
That's so funny.
It's not that they don't want social interaction. They just, once they cap out,
you're done.
They're done. Yeah.
Like, tapped out.
Yep. And they don't mind, letting you know that, or just leaving. Like, where'd he go? Where'd John go? Well, I don't know. He's gone. He left.
We call that's my move. We call that the Houdini.
Yeah.
We just disappear.
Just disappear. That's them. Interesting enough, their core fear is obligation, emptiness, incompetence. They don't like to feel incompetent, especially when it comes to their intellectual abilities or their intellectual expertise, if you will, like whatever. They're an engineer and that's their expertise. They don't like to feel incompetent in that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. They don't like to be overwhelmed. And they don't like to be invaded. So when we look at the 5 and we say part of their, at their worst, if you will, is stinginess, 5s have a fear of depletion in most areas of their life. So they have a fear of depletion in like finances, but they also have a fear of depletion in their ability to give away emotionally. So that's why you see a lot of times 5s holding back. They'll hold back from letting someone in emotionally, or letting you in too much, or letting you too close. So that's a really good indication that 5s are in that. And we talked about the levels of health, right? Healthy, average, and unhealthy. That's a really good indication when you see a 5 really restricting what they're willing to give away, whether that's financially, whether that's emotionally, whether that's mentally, whatever, in any area. That's a really good indication that a 5 is living or camping in that low average to unhealthy space.
Which can be tough. You get stuck in there.
Yeah. And it's hard because 5s also, because their core desire is to be capable and competent in all areas of their life, they don't want to be a burden on anyone. So the message their heart longs to hear, and this is something that I go over in some of my trainings, is the message, the deep message. We all have a deep message that we want to hear or be affirmed in. Theirs is that your needs are not a problem. The hard part with that, with a 5, is they always feel like their needs are a problem. So therefore, they don't ever want to feel like someone else has to take care of them. Someone else has to take on the burden of them or for them. So they hold on. They almost, they kind of, hoard a little bit. They hoard maybe even their finances. They hoard their emotions. They hoard all the things so that they don't run out. They fear running out.
That's good. That's it's so weird. Like so I'm not a 5, but I move into that a lot, and there's a lot of things where you kind of hit some of those things on the button with things that I kind of work through.
Yeah. So so what I was getting at, like 5s don't want, the interesting thing about a 5 is they don't like a lot of obligation placed on them. So for you, that retreats to a 5 or exemplifies some of the average to unhealthy qualities, that may be how you express your stress, but it's not who you are at your core. So that's a prime example, and a really good example of our lines and arrows, right? Because that's a line and arrow for you for going to a 5 in stress, or exemplifying those average unhealthy qualities in stress. But that's how you express your stress. It's not who you are at the core. At the core of a 5, they really don't love feeling obligated to anything. They're not that one that is going to obligate themselves to a party a month out. They're going to wait until the week of and make sure that,
and maybe get out of it,
emotionally and socially spent, to make sure that they can actually engage. They're just not going to do that. They don't want to overextend themselves physically, emotionally, or mentally.
Yeah. So funny. So let's like really dive into the basic fear and the basic desires. I know you kind of have been kind of touching on those things, but let's like really dive through those.
So, like I said, the core fear for a 5 is obligation, annihilation. They don't want to feel like, and this is mostly intellectually for a 5, they don't want to feel like they're incompetent in that area or in the areas that, of, like I said, their expertise. That's just a core fear of theirs. So that might be one of the reasons they don't like obligating themselves too much, in fear that they will be annihilated, or they will be overwhelmed, or too dependent upon. They don't love that. Their core desire, at the core of who they are, they want to feel capable and competent. And so they most often place themselves in situations that will make them feel that way. Whether that's in the job, whether that is in their marriage, whether that is in their relationships. The hard part is with 5s, in the relationship part of it, they have, whereas 4s almost mesh into their emotions. They have a hard time separating themselves from their emotions. 5s have a hard time connecting to their emotions. So when we talk about intimacy, when we talk about relationships, marriage, things like that, that's one of the hardest parts for 5s, is connecting on an emotional level.
Wow.
And so they have to work really extra hard at that. I've actually counseled a lady that is married to a 5, and it's very hard. They've been married for years and years and years. And I think now that kids are out of the house and it's just them, and this happens a lot in marriage too. Like you look at your spouse and you're like, who are you? Like, we've been so consumed with our kids for so many years that some of those things don't impact you until it's just you two again. And you realize, okay, he's not connecting to me emotionally, and I need that. So that can be really hard in relationships for 5s.
Is there like an, I don't know what the word is, but like to help a 5 connect emotionally? Does a healthy 5 connect emotionally, or is that someone who's living in an average to unhealthy?
Yes. So when a 5 is healthy, they're able to, at the very least, identify their emotions.
Okay.
So one of the things that I think is really important for all of us is to be able to identify emotions. You would be shocked at how many people I work with that they will tell me a story or something that happened, and I will simply say, how did that make you feel? And they cannot put an adjective to it. They don't know how to, what we say, name their emotion. They don't know how to do it. And so for 5s, if you've gone pretty much your whole life and never been accountable to your emotions or pinpointing your emotions, it's going to be harder. Like if you're an adult walking this journey, it's going to be harder. So it's really important my son is an 8. I totally believe he's an 8, and in stress, he can do that same thing. And so he's 9, and I want him to name his emotions. I want him to know how he feels on any given moment in his stressful episodes, if you will. And so keeping an emotion sheets with you in your journal. I give lists of emotions out. Journaling for a 5 is a really good mindful exercise, because it forces you to get what's inside that you're holding in out. And it just gets you into that habit. So maybe in the beginning, you're journaling these things out, and in a month, you've gotten so into the habit of journaling these things out. Now you're even willing to talk to your spouse about the things that you're journaling about. It's a transition to what you're used to, for sure, as a 5.
So weird. I feel like I'm like I've just like like the whole like shifting down into a 5, like I didn't mentally understand it, but like this whole conversation, I'm like, oh yeah, I get stressed out or I have an emotion and I'm like, I don't know what the name of it is. I don't know. Like someone's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I don't know. I just don't know. Yeah. So I totally resonate with you guys that live in the 5 era on a daily basis. I get it, and I love the journaling aspect of it. What you're thinking about, what you're saying about that, because it is true. And there's some sort of a thing too where maybe there's like a trust issue of even being able to speak out your emotions. And so being able to write that stuff out and knowing that you can trust yourself to have it in this notebook and nobody's going to see it is going to help you kind of work through that a little bit in the beginning too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm a big journaler. I'm a big advocate of journaling across the board for anyone. But 5s, if they can really bring themselves to create a habit of journaling, even if it's once or twice a week, it can be a game changer. I mean, some of the emotions that are easy to express, right? Anger, I'm angry. But what we know is that there's a primary emotion and then there's secondary emotions. And what we understand is, have you ever seen the iceberg of emotions? So whatever that emotion is, it typically uses anger as that emotion that we can pinpoint initially. But then there's all these different emotions underneath. And the essence of that is when we look at the iceberg, what we can see, what we allow people to see is rarely what's actually going on. Right? So what I allow someone to see, unless I'm in a really healthy space, what I allow people to see is rarely what's actually going on underneath the water. So the tip of the iceberg is not what sank the Titanic. It's everything else that was underneath that sank the Titanic. And so it's trying to pinpoint some of those things that are underneath the water that we don't want other people to see.
Yeah.
That's really, really important.
So good.
Yeah.
What's next?
So wings for a 5. The good thing is the wings of a 5, and here's the deal. 5s, I don't have a study to show this, but if any number was going to stay in their home space and not visit their wings or not use their wings to flavor their number or give layer to their number, I would think it would be a 5, because they are so homebodies, if you will, if for lack of a better term. Now, I have no studies to show that. But when they do allow themselves to give layers to their personality and give flavor to their personality, that 5 that gives flavor to their personality using the 4, they tend to be more creative and not so black and white or not so logical. They tend to be more sensitive and empathetic, but they can be more self-absorbed and withdrawn. So while a 5 at their core withdraws because that's just who they are, they like to withdraw with a good book or a good intellectual study. Like that's just who they are. A 5 that flavors that core of who they are with that 4 will withdraw even more into their emotions, which isn't always a good thing. However, flavoring that 5 with the 6 wing, they become more extroverted because 6s are more extroverted. They become very loyal, but then they also become very anxious in their thoughts. So 5, 6s, and 7s are very cerebral anyway because they're part of that head triad. But they become very anxious, they become skeptical, cautious, and they stay in their head a lot. And so they take on some of those more anxious qualities that the 6 has when they tap into that 6 wing more often. So, but like we said, just so we can make sure that we understand wings with each episode, is just remember that I'm not a huge advocate that a lot of people will say, well, I'm a 5 with a 4 wing, or I'm a 5 with a 6 wing. I think we can tap into or utilize our wings for our benefit at any given time. And so my encouragement there is to, as you're discovering your type and as you're growing in your type, really look into your wings and how you can utilize your wings, because that just gives more and more depth to who you are.
Changes things up a bit.
It does. Like I said last week, I've learned in this whole pandemic thing and this whole social distancing thing, because I do tend to default to my 3 wing more often. I've learned to use my 5 wing and stay in my office for longer periods of time and get work done and study and dive into different things. Whereas on a normal life, I don't do that as often. And so keep in mind, in different seasons of life, you can use those wings differently.
Let's go into the arrows and the deals, the lines and the arrows to the 8s and the 7s, the growths and the stresses. Talk to us about, let's do an overview real quick of just what those are. And then like, how do we, like you like to say, exemplify these numbers?
Qualities. And the reason I say that is because sometimes when we say that a 5 goes to a 7 in stress, it almost insinuates that your personality changes under stress. And it doesn't change the core of who you are. It just, our lines and arrows shows how we respond in different seasons of life, whether stress or growth. And so with that, a 5 will exemplify some of the average to unhealthy. And keep in mind, when we're talking about average and unhealthy, we're keeping in mind those ranges of health, the healthy, the average, and the unhealthy. And so a 5 will exemplify those average to unhealthy type of areas of the 7, which is the enthusiast or the entertaining optimist, right? And so they become very hyperactive. They can become very scattered. And this is pretty noticeable, if you will, in a 5, because it is so different than the core of the 5 of who they are, which is very, like we said, very constrained, and very focused. So they impulsively take on new projects. They can become unfocused and distracted easily, which is indicative of a 7. So like we've said before, these lines and arrows give us a sense of self-awareness. And so if I know this about myself, right? If I'm a 5 and I know this about myself, that I'm acting in this way, then it can be used as a little bit of a rerouting GPS tool to go, okay, I need to reroute myself here because I'm not acting in line with who I really am. I'm acting in line with how I would if I'm stressed or whatnot. So that is stress. Growth for a 5 is to exemplify some of the higher qualities of an 8. So where a 5 will hold back, we know 8s, and we'll learn that about 8s, don't hold back. So your insecure 5s become more self-confident and decisive. They get in touch with their feelings more. They get in touch with the feelings of others more, and they can become more of an advocate for others, whereas that is not the core of who they are as a 5. Because at the core of who they are, they hold back. And so when they're really moving in that growth space and they're really learning and growing, they're able to let their guard down some and really see other people and not be so self-absorbed.
That's good. This is good.
Awesome.
It's so good. It's just an amazing way. Like, so I have a friend who like refuses to take this test, and I'm actually was just talking to his wife right now, and I'm like, I think this is it. I think this is it. I think we found it. And so it's just interesting to hear the explanation of a personality. Not to say that we're going to go and like pin a number on a person, because we don't like to do that, but helps you understand the way people either shut down or they bulldoze forward, and things that happen, even for yourself too. Again, as an 8, like I slip into that 5 and shut people out and kind of go into my own seclusion and all that stuff. And so it's just interesting to see how this all melds together. So neat.
Yeah, and it's important to understand for 5s the reason they tend to shut down, and the reason is they're, in their perspective, they don't have enough internal resources to meet the needs of themselves and everyone around them. And so for them, what's their option? If there's not enough resources, you cut it off, right? Prime example, grocery stores right now. There's not enough resources. So what do you see on the shelves? A limited amount that you can buy, right? That's a little bit of a physical analogy of what 5s do, right? They're afraid that there isn't enough internal resources for them to meet the needs of everything going on. And so they go, okay, you've bought 2 already, so you're done, for at least for today, right? We'll start over tomorrow. But so that's actually a really good physical analogy to what internally sometimes goes on with a 5.
Just total shutdown. Like it's just, and it's like immediate. Like you hit a wall.
It can be. And the hard part with a 5 is, and what I've experienced is when you live in that space, and this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say the vast majority of people live in an average space of life. We live in this average, right? But the hard part about living in the average is we're so close to that unhealthy. And we can slip down into that unhealthy so quickly and so easily if we're not working towards a sense of self-awareness and growth. Mm-hmm. So if we're not moving, we're constantly moving. So if we're not moving forward, we're moving backwards. We typically do not just stand still in life, right? That's just the law of motion. And so with that, fives, when they've lived in that cut off place for so long, it's really hard to all of a sudden expect a five to just, okay, now our kids are out of the house and now I want you to connect to me. Well, I haven't connected emotionally to you in 20 years since our kids, you know what I'm saying? And so, so we have to extend some grace in that and go, this is going to be a process. This is going to be a process. And so for a five, we know that they have the ability to come out of their shell because of their growth space of an 8. That's the hope. That's the encouragement, is when we look at each number's growth space, that's the encouragement that we all have these uncanny abilities to do things that are outside of what we find so comfortable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Since we're kind of on this topic, let's talk about, I think we asked this the last couple episodes, let's talk about what's it like to be in a relationship, or how do you be in a relationship with a 5, whether it be on a spousal intimate relationship or a friend relationship, or maybe even a business relationship, or any part of that.
So being in relationship with fives often feel almost intruded upon in relationships. And so you walk a fine line with fives, whether you work with them or you live with them, you walk a fine line with them on understanding just how much is too much, a little bit. And they do need a great deal of privacy. And so they hold their privacy at a high regard. And it's not that they're being deceptive. It's not that they're being, although they can be, all of us can be. But it's not that that's the core of why they want their privacy. It's just they hold on to that at a very high regard. And so being in a relationship with them is it's really important to give them that. But then, right, like, especially if we're talking marriage is give and take. It's understanding when that person sees that you are graciously giving them what they need. The hope and the prayer always is that that person gets filled up to a place where it's a cycle, right, to where they also give you what you need. And that's the growth in marriage and relationships, is I allow you the privacy you need. You allow me the intimacy or the emotional connection that I need. That's always the hope. They often feel rejected. But that can be a little of their own doing, actually. And so sometimes their cutting off can be a way to protect themselves, which that would be more so for the ones that tap more into that 6 wing, because 6 is the loyalist and they want to protect themselves from being betrayed. So that 5 with that strong 6 wing can very much be that way too. So what can I do to protect myself? We're always in this protective preservation mode as humans, right? How can we protect ourselves? What do we need to do to protect ourselves? And so 5s can find themselves in that place too. And then they can be overwhelmed with the emotional needs of others. And so that's just really important to understand. That's why when we're talking about intimate relationships, when we're talking about marriage, I feel like this goes right along up there with the 5 love languages to me, of knowing what and who, not what, but who you're marrying.
Sometimes
At the core, at the core, so that you can start those conversations early, so that you're not 20 years into marriage and kids are out of the house and we've emotionally disconnected for 20 years because that's what's been easy. Mm-hmm. Right? We're not having that conversation 20 years down the road. We're having that conversation from day one.
So can you just walk through, maybe like somebody's listening and they're like, how do I even start to have that conversation? Maybe their spouse is a 5, mm-hmm. and like, how do you begin to have that conversation with them of, hey, let's talk about our emotions. Come sit over here.
Yeah. Not like that.
Don't do that at home.
That is jumping into the deep end for a 5. Maybe putting the toe in would be good. No, I think there has to be a willingness to see legitimacy in our personalities, that there is a legitimate reasoning as to why we do some of the things that we do. And our core personality has a lot to do with that. So there has to be a willingness to see that and work through that. So that's the first thing. So, and the first, you may assume your spouse is a 5, but I would definitely, or maybe you work closely with somebody and you're close enough to them to where you really want to be able to connect on a deeper level in your work relationship. Don't type them. Have them see if there's a willingness for them to take the assessment. And then have them read through the information that's given to see if the things that are presented that they resonate with.
Would you say that 5s are hesitant to take the tests?
Probably I would say. But here's why. They're so logical. Like things are logical for them. They see things as in very 2 + 2 is 4. And for this is psychological. This is emotional. This is connecting all of the different parts of us. And the part that 5s connect best with is their intellect. So because they connect so well with their intellect, things like this don't always make sense to them. It doesn't always, and remember, they don't like to feel annihilated or incompetent. And so if they feel incompetent, if it makes them feel incompetent, then they'll retreat.
They're out.
So something like this initially could make them feel incompetent. Like, this is showing me darker sides of myself that I don't want to see, that make me feel a way that I don't want to feel. So I always like I had a client that she was a 4. I knew she was a 4 before she took the assessment, but she took the assessment, strong 4, and she read all of the negative and she didn't want us discussing the Enneagram at all in any of our sessions. And of course I respected that. That's totally fine. And every now and then, a couple of times, what I would do is I would say, hey, can we talk about all the amazing parts of who you are? And that can start to break the ice of getting them to open up more to the other pieces of the puzzle, right? Like, hey, can we just talk about all the amazing parts of who you are? Like, look what this says, man. I mean, you are the person that people want to come to because you can think logically. You can help people in decision making. You're that person, right? Like, so that can be the icebreaker for softening someone to something like this, especially someone like a 5.
So taking the test and then really just getting into an explanation with them and highlighting the goodness. I think naturally, for some reason, we tend to go toward the negative, like automatically. You know what I mean? Like, we just, like, even with the 8s, like, we see the unhealthy, like, for me, I see the unhealthiness. I'm like, that's not me, but it's all a part of that. That doesn't mean that that's hitting the nail on the head, or maybe it is, and maybe it's hitting a part where, we just don't want to confront that, but doesn't mean that it's a bad thing just because it's different or it's seen different or it's seen as a negative. I believe that all these things are positives as long as you start to, like you've been saying, is that you become aware of these things. That's going to inevitably help you grow into the next level.
It's going to enhance every single part of our life. I always say the thing that I love about the Enneagram and helping people understand the core of who they are is it helps them not both professionally and personally. There is the growth that happens in both of those areas when self-awareness occurs is there's not a price tag on that. And so with that, we can, there's something that I was going to say about what you were talking about. Yes, we do tend to go to the negative, and here's why. Because we tend to default to some of these assessments or some of these tools, if you will, when life is hard, right? Or when so-and-so's being crappy to me. And so I want to figure out what type they are to figure out why they're being crappy towards me or whatever. And so inevitably our initial instinct is to pinpoint, well, oh, that's why they're being this way, or that's why they're being this way, or that's why they're being this way. And all of the negative ends up being
highlighted
and none of the positive. And so that's why I think, one, this is important to take in the honeymoon stages of your relationships. And that could be even in a job setting, like, a new job, a new fun adventure seems fun at the time until you get to know all the people you're working with 6 months down the road. And you're like, I hate my job and I hate myself. So even when I say honeymoon phase, it can be in anything, whether that's a job or a friendship or a relationship or a marriage. Like, take these things to use for your own personal growth and the growth of your relationships early on. So it's not all about the negative 6 months down the road. It's about how can I grow in all of the amazing qualities that I do possess.
Yeah. And, I talked about this in the first few podcasts, is that I had my office, my team take the Enneagram, and it has helped me to approach each one of them differently and better, and learning how to give compliments to the people that need compliments, and to give high fives for the people that need high fives, or to just give a look for the person that really doesn't want to have attention drawn to them, and different things like that. Because what we tend to do is deliver the way that we want to receive things, and people don't receive things all in the same way, whether that's with, again, the 5 love languages and all that stuff. But this has helped me as a boss communicate better with my team and have a conversation and be able to see them in the middle of a stressful situation, and kind of like, and I'm still learning it all of them, but be able to be in a stressful situation and be like, oh, this is why they're responding in this way. Let's just give them a minute. Like, let's not react. Let's not bombard. Yeah. Let's let them kind of work through their own feelings, and it's all going to be fine in 20 minutes, Yeah. And so I highly, highly, highly recommend this. If you are a leader of a team, to be the person that brings this to your team and dive in, have them listen to all 10 of these episodes, and really start understanding how people are wired. Because without this tool, you're going to be speaking 2 different languages to each other, and neither one of you are going to understand it. And then one's going to get so frustrated, they're going to close off and leave. So this has just been an incredible tool for my team, and also like even for my brother, who's the other co-owner of our office. For our team to see how he functions, and for them to see how I function, and for us to see how they function. And so we're all kind of now able to kind of work congruently together and know what's, it's coming, how they're going to respond.
Yeah.
And so kind of work through all that. So that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm reading a book right now called Breathing Underwater by Richard Rohr. And Richard Rohr is a big Enneagram guy too. This book is actually not an Enneagram book. It's actually the spiritualities of a 12-step program of AA, basically. And so it's interesting because as I was reading yesterday, I was reading parts of it, and he talks about how we think of addiction as drugs and alcohol, right? Like that's the easiest thing that we can relate to when it comes to addiction or label as addiction. But he said, really, we're all addicted. And the biggest thing that we're addicted to is our own way of thinking.
For
and
sure.
That was wowzers, like full, like in my face, right? Because I go, oh my gosh, we're seeing it right now in our culture. And we can do that too with our own lens by which we see things, is we become so absorbed in how we think and in how, and so addicted to the way we think that we're unwilling to step out of that, even for a moment, to not necessarily be changed, but to just relate to how someone else thinks or perceives something.
Mm-hmm.
And that, when you're able to do that, that is empowering. That is empowering.
It's a good word.
Yep.
It's a good word. Anything else you want to bring in? We're hitting up on an hour here, pretty close. Anything else you want to bring in for these fives, or did we hit all the things necessary?
Oh gosh, I don't think we can ever hit all the things, but I can get some other info to you for just your blurbs on Instagram. I just think it's so important for fives to practice some emotional self-awareness. And so if you're a five, just try this week, every now and then, just stepping back and asking yourself, how do I feel in this moment? And just periodically stop what you're doing, step back and go, how do I feel in this moment? And just get in the habit of naming your emotion. That will help you along this journey of just being able to, maybe first it's just naming it, but eventually you'll start to see how you can begin to connect with it.
So good. So good. Awesome. Again, we can connect with Angie she's got Instagram. It's in the show notes of this podcast. You can go, it's Kairos Coaching with K's, Kairos Koaching. Woo, that's a mouthful when you're trying to spell. You can connect with her on Instagram. You can go to her website, which is the same thing.com. And then it's kairoscoaching.com, right?
Yes, Kairos Coaching. Yep.
And then if you want to hook up with me, I'm still doing discovery calls. It's 30 minutes for free. You can just get set up, and we can see if I can help you in any way, kind of get back past your stuck. Big things with Battle Ready. What we do is we focus on renewing your mind, refining your body, and refreshing your spirit. And those are the three things we want to focus on in that area. So anything that you're struggling with, we want to make sure that you're prepared and that you are battle ready to go out and take on the day. And so if you want to, you can just text the word battle to 33777, and that will set up a kind of a text thread of how to get signed up for the discovery call. So text the word battle to 33777, and I can't wait to see what you're up to and what we can do. So thank you, Angie, again for another hot topic for the Enneagram 5s. Guys, leave comments on Instagram. I'm having so much fun. The 4s are blowing it out of the water with their comments, with their likes, with all the things that they're doing on Instagram. And it is just like blowing my mind. So leave the comments. I look at all of them. I try to respond. Like the posts, send them to your friends, put them in your stories, whatever you want to do. Maybe we'll even do a giveaway this week on the Battle Ready Co. Instagram. So we love you guys. We thank you. I'm excited for this week for you guys to kind of learn more about 5s. Make sure you're checking out the Instagram posts. And then we'll see you next week for the 6s. Love you guys. Stay safe. Be well. Know that God loves you. Bye-bye.